Good afternoon. My name is Rose Martinez. Thank you for joining the Bellwether College Consortium's webinar titled, In a Time of Crisis, Supporting Colleges and Students with CARES Act Funding. As the director of the Bellwether College Consortium, I'm honored to be your moderator today and pleased to welcome Assistant Secretary Scott Stump and Deputy Assistant Secretary Casey Sachs from the U.S. Department of Education, as well as Dr. Mike Flores, who serves as Chancellor for the Alamo Colleges District in San Antonio, Texas. Mr. Stumps and Dr. Sachs will provide insight on the CARES Act funding, specifically providing detailed information on the discretionary grants to states, the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, and finally the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund. Dr. Flores will speak to the extensive and significant efforts his college district has implemented to identify eligible students and distribute CARES Act funds. The CARES Act supports the creation of a stabilization fund totaling $30.75 billion. These funds were provided to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus. After our guest presentations, we have reserved time to address a few questions that will begin with a few selected questions from a few of you who registered for this session. Questions will also be selected via our live chat function. Please know our panelists will be unable to address all your questions in the time allotted, but they have graciously agreed to address every question in a follow-up FAQ document that will be available on the consortium's website, and I'm sure the Department of Education's website, as well as this recording of this webinar also will be available on the consortium's website. Before I announce our special guests, let me take a moment to share more about the Bellwether College Consortium. The Bellwether College Consortium is comprised of award-winning colleges with a courageous and sustained charge to address critical issues facing community colleges through applicable research and the promotion and replication of best practices addressing workforce development, instructional programs and services, and planning, governance, and finance. We are a member-supported, independent think tank where each member college holds the national distinction of being named a Bellwether finalist or a Bellwether Award winner. The award competition has a long and rich history dating back to 1994. Our annual events include the BCC Policy Summit and the Community College Futures Assembly, where the chosen 30 Bellwether finalists are invited to compete for the award annually. The three categories are instructional programs and services, workforce development, and planning, governance, and finance. I am very pleased to announce the submission portal for the 2021 Bellwether Award Competition is open and can be found on our Bellwether website. Colleges are not required to be a member to apply. Last year, we received applications from 23 states and the U.S. Marshall Islands. We hope to have an even greater number of states and U.S. territories participate for 2021. I want to emphasize that Bellwether is committed to hosting a safe and engaging policy summit and futures assembly. We plan to announce at a later date if an in-person or virtual conference in January is the most prudent option. Beyond the prestigious Bellwether Award competition, our members receive access to informative webinars with noted practitioners, policymakers, and researchers. Today's presentation was open to all colleges, given the vital nature of the information and the consortium's commitment to being a source of valuable and timely information for our higher education colleagues. If you have any questions about Bellwether College Consortium, I invite you to go to our website or send me an email message. I will happily entertain your questions. We have heard these recent times described as interesting, unprecedented, challenging, difficult, and uncertain. Given these unforeseen circumstances, I would be remiss not to take a moment to thank everyone participating on this webinar. If there was any question of the importance of higher education, and particularly community colleges, it is quite evident now that we are needed. The nimbleness, particularly of community colleges, administrative operations, and flexibility of our staff and instructors to transition thousands of classes from in-person to online has been nothing short of extraordinary. Words come to mind when I think of community colleges like remarkable, resilient, determined, persistent, strong, resolute. And I can say those same words when I think of our students. Thank you Thank you for your tenacity and commitment to creating thoughtful and innovative responses and solutions to challenges that we have no playbook for. Now, let me introduce each speaker in the order of their presentations. I will rejoin the session to moderate the Q&A after Dr. Flores' prepared remarks. So let's begin. Our first speaker is Assistant Secretary Scott Stump. Prior to assuming the role of Assistant Secretary for Career, Technical, and Adult Education, Scott served as a Chief Operating Officer with Vivayic Incorporated, a learning solutions provider devoted to helping individuals, organizations, and corporations do good in the world. Before that, Mr. Stump served as the Assistant Provost and State Director for Career and Technical Education with the Colorado Community College System. Our second speaker is Dr. Sachs. Casey Sachs is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Community Colleges in the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education at the U.S. Department of Education. She provides leadership for initiatives supporting career and technical education, adult education, and correctional and reentry education, and community colleges. These initiatives collectively serve over 25 million students each year. Our final speaker is Dr. Mike Flores. With more than 20 years of service to the Alamo Colleges District, located in San Antonio, Texas, Dr. Flores possesses the distinction of being the first Hispanic chancellor in the district's history. Flores' vision for the district, eliminating poverty through education, is based on his personal experience as a child of migrant farm workers who pursued education to gain economic and social mobility. During his leadership, Alamo Colleges District celebrated the recognition as the only community college system in the nation to be awarded the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, and has launched Alamo Promise, a tuition-free college program for graduating high school students in Bexar County. Let's begin. I'll hand it over to Assistant Secretary Stump.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, and it is a pleasure for Dr. Sachs and myself to be here today. I'm Scott Stump, the Assistant Secretary with the United States Department of Education in the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education. And, while we've been blessed to connect with many different members of the Bellwether College Consortium over our years with the Community College System in Colorado and in West Virginia in our current roles, for those of you that Casey and I have not met, I do want to first and foremost offer to connect with you. Our email addresses are simple. It's scott.stump@ed.gov. For Casey, it's Casey, CASEY.SACKS@ed.gov. And I will tell you, especially in this time with so many moving parts and needs to really discover new ways to serve our students, please be in touch with us and let us know how we can help in that process. Today, though, as we look at the title of this session, Time of Crisis, Supporting Colleges and Students with CARES Act Funding, we do want to cover just a couple main topics today. First, we want to summarize the CARES Act education provisions, and then address some of the frequently asked questions regarding the department and COVID-19 flexibilities. Now, while I'm sure that many of you have become good students of the CARES Act and have looked at it in detail, our intent is to make you, again, aware of the width and breadth of the Act. We intentionally will include the provisions for both K-12 and higher education institutions because we believe that the systems will need to respond to the impact of COVID-19 as a collective. So let's begin. The CARES Act provides $30.75 billion for an education stabilization fund to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus or COVID-19. The funds are available, and the good news is through September 30th of 2021. And as a part of that, and we'll say this many times throughout, so please make sure to jot it down at least one of those times. Our guidance for ED is all housed in one website, and it is ed.gov/coronavirus. If you just go to ed.gov and off the front page of our website, down at the bottom, you'll find a tile that says coronavirus response or COVID-19. Select that, and that will take you to this page. But please know that any frequently asked questions, any non-regulatory guidance, any of the applications for and paths to approach the grants All of that is housed on this site. So please take a look as you move forward. So one of the first things we want to start with is the education discretionary grants to states that have emerged over the past couple of weeks. And the bill provides for $307.5 million, or 1% of the total dollars, for the Secretary to make discretionary grants to states with the highest coronavirus burden. And the bill calls for the notice inviting applications to be out within 30 days, which occurred, and then the awards 30 days after receipt of the applications. So the applications are out right now for the Rethinking K-12 Education Models, or REM, grants, and it is nearly out, and in the coming days will be out for the Reimagining Workforce Preparation. And just to give you a little bit of background on both of these grants, the Education Stabilization Fund Rethinking K-12 Education Model grants is meant to provide support to state education agencies, or SEAs, in states with the highest coronavirus burden to address specific educational needs of the students, their parents, and teachers in public and non-public elementary and secondary schools. The Education Stabilization Fund for Reimagining Workforce Preparation Grants, or RWP as we've been calling it, will provide support to states to help them leverage the power of entrepreneurship to create new education opportunities and pathways to help citizens return to work and small businesses recover and new entrepreneurs thrive. These programs also build new capacity within the state to offer short-term post-secondary programs that are responsive to the needs of individuals and can more rapidly adapt and evolve to meet the needs of the changing workplace and community. Both of those grants, like I said, if you need more information, the email address is there to a central repository that will be the quickest way for you to get responses on details on each of those grants. So it's just esf-rwp@ed.gov for a little more information. With that, let's shift over to the Governor's Emergency Relief Fund.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, everybody. I'm Casey Sachs. It's great to be with you today. Thank you so much for having us. The next part of the CARES Act is in the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. This is nearly $3 billion that's gone out to states in a formula basis. So 60% of the formula is just based on the population of your state of folks who are 5 to 24, and the other 40% is based on the share of poor children based on most current census estimates. So governors have already been notified of the amount of money that's been allocated for your state. And then you have a lot of flexibility in the state about how you use those funds. Governors get to make choices. So they can be used for subgrants to local education agencies, for subgrants to institutions of higher ed, and for any other subgrant to an educated related entity in your state. The really important thing is that you look holistically at your education system and think about where have we been most significantly impacted by coronavirus, and then how do we continue providing ongoing education for our state and provide ongoing functionality. The funds can be used for a variety of things, including unique kinds of emergency education services, but also including childcare or early childhood education, social and emotional support, and certainly protecting education-related jobs is specifically in the Act.
In addition to the governor's funds, there also is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. And this fund equates to $13.2 billion for the fund for grants to state education agencies. And these funds are allocated by formula based on the Title I Part A shares that is used for most recent state's fiscal year. And with SEAs subgranting 90% of the funds to LEAs, they'll also do that based on the Title I shares. LEAs may use the funds for any activity authorized under ESEA, IDEA, AFLA, which is the Adult Education Act, and then also Perkins Act, which covers the career and technical education programs, and McKinney-Vento. Funds may also be used for a wide range of activities related to responding to the coronavirus, including coordination of efforts with public health departments and other relevant agencies, addressing the needs of disadvantaged students and populations, and planning for closures and purchasing and using technology for online learning. providing meals to students, meeting IDEA requirements, providing mental health services, and implementing summer learning and supplemental after-school programs. SEAs may use half of the 1% of their 10% share for administration, and then the remainder for emergency needs related to coronavirus.
So the next part of the CARES Act is probably the part that most of the higher ed institutions in the room are most familiar with, and it's the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund. So that's just short of $14 billion that have been allocated out to institutions of higher education in three different buckets. The first are in grants to institutions of higher education. So that's 90% of the nearly $14 billion, $12.5 billion that have gone out directly to institutions of higher education. Again, with the same theme of preventing, prepare for, and responding to coronavirus. Those allocations to colleges were based on 75% the share of Pell Grant recipients and 25% FTE enrollment. So those funds are out there right now. And then of those grants to IHEs, it's split into two pots. Half of it has to go directly to students through the colleges. So your college is making decisions about how to give students emergency grants. And the other half is designated as institutional support to help your institution respond and prepare for and be responsive to your community in terms of the coronavirus. The second part of the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund, so we've got the grants to institutions of higher education. The second part are grants to HBCUs and MSIs. So that's 7.5% of the funds, or just over $1 billion, that have gone out to institutions that are eligible under Title III, 5, and 7 of the Higher Education Act. And the funds are allocated to those programs proportional to the level of funding that they were receiving in fiscal year 20. So then HBCIs and MSIs can use those funds for additional operating costs, including expenses that they've already seen, any program expenses, and they can repurpose their Title III, 5, and 7 funds to respond to coronavirus. So these funds are a lot more flexible than the direct grants to institutions, but they're really designed to be for operating costs, closures, transitions to distance education, and really for grants to students that could cover any component of the student's cost of attendance. So that's the second. And then the third, institution of higher education funds are really in FIPSI awards. So that's 2.5% of the CARES allocation. And that's for institutions of higher education that have the greatest unmet need related to coronavirus. That could be including lost revenue or technology, transitioning to distance education, grants to students for any component of the student's cost of attendance. And the Secretary's been directed to give priority to institutions of higher ed that had received less than $500,000 under either the grants to HBCUs and MSIs or the grants to institutions of higher education. So there are also a couple of higher ed provisions in the CARES Act. None of the funds are allowed to be used for pre-enrollment or recruitment activities. The funds can't be used for endowments or capital outlays, nothing related to athletics or secretariat instruction. So just a note for all of you out there who are working on your planning to just know that up front. And at least of the grants to institutions of higher ed, as I mentioned, at least 50% of those grants have to be used as emergency financial grants to students for expenses related to coronavirus for them, including food, housing, course materials, technology, healthcare, childcare, that students get these grants and can really make choices for themselves about where they have the greatest need. So I'm going to turn it back over to Scott. We have a whole bunch of questions that we anticipate. So we're going to try and answer some of those up front to leave more time for the other questions that you might have as we move forward.
You bet. And Casey, I apologize for being slow moving that slide forward there for you. But yes, we did the FIPSI cover. Yeah, a number of questions have been addressed about for institutions of higher education funds from CARES. All of those are posted on our website at www.ed.gov/coronavirus, the address there in the center of the screen. And a couple that people have consistently emailed us about that we just want to highlight for you, that in those sets of frequently asked questions, for instance, are related to questions about the student funds. And one of them being, can institutions that have provided information technology, such as laptops, hotspots, internet devices, et cetera, and other related equipment to students reimburse themselves for the funds for the emergency financial aid grants to the students? And the answer to that is no. While we at the department who have a background and experience in higher ed institutions absolutely appreciate the way that campuses, campus leaders and institutions have stepped forward and provided that equipment to students, the CARES Act requires that institutions provide the emergency financial aid grants to students directly, and allowing them choice then how to invest and where they need those funds to go. Section 2 of the funding certification and agreement for the emergency financial aid grants to student states, recipients shall not use these funds to reimburse itself for any costs or expenses, including but not limited to any costs associated with significant changes to the delivery of instruction due to the coronavirus and or any refunds or other benefits that recipient previously issued to students. A second related question is, can institutions use the funds for the emergency financial aid grants to students to pay outstanding or overdue student bills to the institution? And again, the answer to that is no. The CARES Act requires institutions to provide the emergency financial aid grants to students. The institution may not use a portion of that higher ed emergency fund set aside for emergency financial aid grants to students to satisfy a student's outstanding balance, but the department notes that the student may use their emergency financial aid grant for expenses related to the disruption of campus operations due to coronavirus. We've also gotten questions directly from students about their grants, and just want to share a little bit about them with you. One question was, I'm a student who received an emergency financial aid grant from my university through the CARES Act. Is this grant includable in my gross income? And the answer is no. According to the Internal Revenue Service, emergency financial aid grants under the CARES Act for unexpected expenses, unmet financial need, or expenses related to the disruption of campus operations on account of COVID-19 pandemic, such as unexpected expenses for food, housing, course materials, technology, healthcare, childcare, are qualified disaster relief payments under Section 139. So the students are taken care of and will be held harmless from the tax burden on their grants. Second question from a student, what can emergency financial aid grants provided by the CARES Act be used for? And so the emergency financial aid grants to the students can be used for expenses related to the disruption of campus operations due to coronavirus, including eligible expenses under a student's cost of attendance, such as tuition, food, housing, course materials, technology, healthcare, and childcare. We've also received questions from the institution share of the dollars. And Casey, what have we found out there?
Sure. So in the institutional funds space, we've gotten a lot of similar questions. Colleges just want to make sure they're spending their dollars appropriately. And a couple that I know that I've heard often have been things like, may institutions use funds that are through the CARES Act for institutional dollars? If we've refunded students for their room or board or tuition or other fees like activities fees or parking fees, can the college reimburse ourselves from the funds, from our institutional funds from the emergency relief pool? And the answer is yes to that. The institutions can use funds that are in the institutional costs that they've already refunded students for room and board and tuition, really anything that's a significant disruption in the delivery of education because of coronavirus, including any of these interruptions. Institutions may reimburse themselves for refunds that have been previously made to students. The magic date is that March 13th date, which is the date that the president proclaimed and declared the national emergency concerning the coronavirus or COVID-19 outbreak. So really, any of the changes that you've experienced as an institution since that date are fair in the institutional funds. And similarly, we've been asked if the institution purchased laptops, so almost the same question that Scott went through, except for institutional dollars. If the college purchased laptops or hotspots or IT equipment to enable students to participate in distance learning as a result of the coronavirus, may we use the institutional funds to reimburse the college for computers and for that kind of technology? And the answer is absolutely yes. Institutions can use funds that are in the institutional funds to pay for all kinds of equipment, software, licensing fees, internet services, to really facilitate that transition to distance learning for students. It's a significant change in delivery of instruction due to coronavirus. And additionally, anything that your college purchased, it's that March 13th date, the date of the national emergency, you can reimburse the college for those kinds of expenses. And a third that has come up a number of times is, may institutions reimburse ourselves for additional emergency financial aid grants to students. So you're doing that 50% and giving it to students already. But if you want to do more than that, or if you've already done some of that, if before the CARES Act was passed, you're one of those really proactive colleges that set up emergency funds for students, how do we manage that space? And the answer is yes, the institutions could use funds through the institutional costs received through CARES to make additional emergency financial aid grants to students for any of the expenses that students have related to the disruption of campus operations due to the coronavirus. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Scott.
Yeah, and so we're going to step now and change the conversation into some of the additional flexibilities that are possible. And when we think about the page, the www.ed.gov/coronavirus, there are on that site a variety of other items that that need to be included. One of those being that when it comes to protective personal equipment, there's a document on there about how your institutions, from their health departments to their construction departments, can really share that, the N95 masks that they have or other PPE with the healthcare facilities and do it appropriately. In addition to that, we've gotten a number of questions from states that around this notion of going online with career and technical education. And yes, a number of states and colleges have shared some terrific resources. And in fact, in Wisconsin, at Gateway Technical College, they have virtual CNC instruction where students write the code at home, then push the code to the CNC machine at the college, and the machine runs the commands, produces the part, and they can watch it from a webcam that's in the lab. We'd also recommend that you check out techforlearners.org. It's a searchable database of online education technology tools that facilitate online classrooms and teaching, and allowing educators to search for free and discounted tools and services by grade level, product type, and subject matter. There's still a lot of questions coming in. We welcome them here today. We'll take any questions we receive back to the team at ED and work as quickly as possible to post responses on our COVID-19 webpage. They're at the address below. We hope you'll understand that today there may be some questions that we're unable to answer, that we will need to take back and work to address across all of the offices within the department. But ultimately, we can't answer a question that we don't know about. So we look forward to having that conversation with you right now.
Good day. My name is Mike Flores. I have the honor of serving as Chancellor of the Alamo Colleges District, and I'm glad to be with you. I want to thank our officials from the U.S. Department of Education and the Bellwether College Consortium for having this conversation and engagement with all of us nationwide during this critical period. I want to just give you a sense of what it looks like with the Alamo Colleges District. We're fortunate to have mission alignment all the way from our Board of Trustees throughout the organization to the leadership team and my 5,000 colleagues, faculty, and staff in our 5 college district and our 8 regional centers throughout our 8 county service area. We're the largest provider of talent in South and Central Texas, and so we are blessed to serve thousands of students throughout our region. We're particularly fortunate to be the only community college district to have received the Malcolm Baldrige Organizational Performance Award. We are fortunate that we have 3 of our 5 colleges that were recognized in 2021 as part of the Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence, and 4 colleges in 2019, including Palo Alto College, that was recognized in the top 10 of community colleges throughout the region, and most recently to have been recognized by Achieving the Dream and to be a leader college with distinction over a decades long focus on performance excellence and student success. You can see that our student profile that we serve in any given year in the Alamo Colleges District over 100,000 students annually, the largest provider of talent in South and Central Texas. Over 76% are students of color, the vast majority, 2/3 are female, and over 80% are part-time and a fifth are full-time. 62% of our students are underprepared, and 70% receive some form of financial aid. We are very fortunate to serve the students that we serve in the community that we serve. You can see that many of our students have multiple needs and in fact live on the margins, have competing demands not only on their time, but also on their pocketbook. And we want to ensure that we provide them with wraparound support services so that they are successful. One of the things that we are fortunate is that we develop proof of concept in one of our colleges and utilize our 5 colleges to be able to provide for discovery, incubation, and acceleration throughout that time. Our student advocacy centers actually started at 2 of our colleges, San Antonio College, Palo Alto College, and are now at scale at all 5 colleges within our system, providing both food assistance, providing closed closet, emergency grant aid that it was actually piloted over 2 years ago, and which you'll learn about during this conversation, and then being able to ensure that we connect our students to resources all through our 5 college student advocacy center network. And then on the next slide, you'll see CARES. So we're particularly mindful and affirmed and want to thank our representatives in Washington, D.C., the Congress working with the President, and in particular the executive branch to provide support, direct support through the CARES Act. We received in the Alamo Colleges District over $22 million, half of that, $11.2 million in direct aid and emergency grant aid, which we had actually pioneered in an institutional effort over 2 years ago, but now have been able to provide assistance to our students directly to them in emergency grant aid. And then the other half, $11.2 million in general institutional aid through CARES. And then you can see an additional amount taking us up to $30 million through 3 of our colleges being Hispanic serving institutions, and then St. Philip's College being the only college in the nation to bear both the HSI as well as the HBCU designation. So that additional aid beyond the 22, an additional close to 7 to 8 million, that takes us up to 30 million in aid. Most importantly, what we can see is that that was an effort of our financial aid office working with our advocacy center network to ensure that all of those students were case managed that applied for emergency grant aid under CARES, that were able to provide intake, determine the needs that they had, and then to work with them to provide additional wraparound support services during this critical period of COVID-19. And then most importantly, you can see the statistics of the students that very much mirror our whole student population. We were able to provide aid to close to 18,000 students. Each student was provided with emergency grant aid of $300, and then students were provided with additional support and were able to apply for that in conversations with staff at each of our 5 advocacy centers, as well as staff in our financial aid office, to determine the additional needs that they had, to ensure that they were able to what we call cross the finish line, able to finish the spring term, able to ensure that they would apply for classes and for assistance if needed during the summer. One of the things that we've been able to do at the Alamo Colleges is not only utilize CARES Act funding, but also to combine that with institutional support. We're particularly pleased that students crossed the finish line in the spring semester during COVID and were able to transition and enroll in summer courses, which will start on June the 9th, and then to continue hopefully for the fall semester. So the CARES Act funding, the $22 million, either in emergency aid, institutional aid, and additional supports for HBCU and Hispanic serving institutions, was combined with an additional investment of $9 million of what we call our Keep Learning Plan, which provided scholarship assistance for unpaid balances in the fall of 19, the spring of 20, and now our expanded Summer Momentum program, which is providing institutionally funded scholarships for part-time students to enroll for up to 2 free courses, and then full-time students to enroll for support for 3 courses. So I want to thank you for being on this engagement, for being with us, for all of us learning what is being provided by the U.S. Department of Education, and then providing and learning about what has been provided by an institution. We've been affirmed by the learning community that we've had within the state of Texas, nationally, learning from our colleagues in the community college sector, which is so vital to ensuring recovery and reentry for the United States, and looking at what we've been able to provide here at the Alamo Colleges District. Thank you to the U.S. Department of Education. Thank you to the Bellwether College Consortium. I want to thank our Board of Trustees, and I especially want to thank my 5,000 colleagues, Alamo Strong, who are able to provide support to each and every one of our students in the Alamo Colleges District. Muchísimas gracias. Thank each and every one of you.
Technical difficulties. That was excellent. Thank you, Dr. for providing an informative example of how CARES Act funding is being distributed by Alamo College District. And thank you, Assistant Secretary Scott Stump and Deputy Assistant Secretary Casey Sachs. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to address as many questions as possible. Those that cannot be addressed we will be providing a link with the U.S. Department of Education providing those responses that we cannot get to today. So I'm going to go ahead and start these questions because I know that's probably one of the most important things people are on the line to hear being addressed. The first one is the department announced the release of the CARES Act funds specifically for HBCUs and other MSIs on April 30th. Unlike previous announcements and other portions of the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund, this announcement did not include FAQs on the use of funds. Does the department have a timeline for when we can expect FAQs to be posted on these specific funds?
Hey, Rose.
Hi, Casey.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
I can't seem to start my video, but I can answer the question. We don't have a timeline on FAQ.
Yeah.
We do know that we have 2 more rounds of frequently asked questions in the queue. For anybody who is sort of new to how the Department of Education process works, we draft answers to questions that you send us. We send them to our lawyers. They usually send them back. We send it to our leadership team. And then after that, it has to go to a department that's called OMB. It's the Office of Management and Budget. It's a part of the White House complex. Then OMB sometimes asks questions. They give those back to our lawyers. And then once everybody has said the answers can be published, we put them on our CARES website. So that's the ed.gov/coronavirus. They get posted there at the same time we release press release to any of our agency associations. So oftentimes you'll end up seeing the notice through something that comes out from AACC or ACE or similar associations because you're a member, but they get the notice at the exact same time that it's posted on that website. So that, I don't have a date that I can tell you, but that is where they are in the pipeline. And you're looking at the HBCU MSI certification. Those are the rules that you have to follow associated with the grant that come directly from the Act. So it's always to your benefit to work with your own legal counsel to review what those rules are if you're kind of chomping at the bit ready to get started with the project.
And is there any typical time that they're released, or is they just are posted as they are available?
As they are available.
Okay. Here's a 2-parter. In the electronic announcement date, May 15th, 2020, under Return of Title IV funds, R2T4, qualification for R2T4 relief, it states, any institution that moved students from ground-based instruction to distance learning, closed campus housing, or other campus facilities, or experienced other interruptions in instruction may consider all withdrawals from student enrolled in ground-based instruction during the covered period to have been the result of circumstances related to COVID-19 national emergency. Here's the question. Does the definition of a qualifying emergency only apply to R2T4 since it is never referenced in the satisfactory academic progress section?
It's a great question. Will you give it to me in writing so that I can read it? I don't see it in the list of questions, and I'm such a visual learner that it's hard for me to have heard that whole paragraph and be able to do a good job answering you.
Sure, sure. I'll have Priscilla do that. That came in early, and so that's probably why it was one that came in today. Okay, second, let me move on to a question that was asked just here that are still opened. We have, she said, la, la, la. I'm on the website, but I do not see the revised guidance on this. I'm thinking she's referencing the previous answer that just came through. Let me make sure. Andrea Serban, can you give us a little more information on what you're referring to, and that'll help us. Okay.
Well, Rose, do you want to go through a couple that we answered while the presentation was going for anybody's benefit who's not reading along?
Sure. Well, here's one. Can you please clarify, are institutions able to draw down the institutional dollars before any of the student funds are distributed? And is the amount that can be drawn down limited in any way contingent upon the amount of student dollars distributed?
So the answer that got put in there for you is that you can draw the institutional funds, but you also have to sign that certification on the student funds. You're not allowed to just accept the institutional funds. You have to take both. And then you can only draw the amount of institutional funds proportional to the student funds that you're allocating. So a very small example is, let's say in total you have $100. The college can't keep $50 and then only give out $20 to the students. The students also have to have $50. So if you were to give out $20 to students, then the institution could have $20. So it's a proportional amount.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sure.
And so, Andrea, thank you for providing more information on your question. She said, revised guidance for which students can receive financial support through the CARES Act financial support for students portion. She was saying she did not see the revised guidance on that particular area of the CARES Act, which is the financial support for students portion.
So there's a lot of stuff on the website, which is maybe why you're having trouble finding it. If you go to ed.gov/coronavirus and then scroll down the green subheading that says additional resources for higher education institutions, the third bullet point under that says CARES Act information, nearly $13 billion for higher education emergency relief for students and institutions. Click on that. And then scroll down here. There's a whole bunch of stuff on this page. So all of the higher education information is on this particular website. The first bucket is the higher education emergency relief fund for the student aid. So you see there's how to apply, a letter from the secretary, go down to frequently asked questions. So there's a PDF under frequently asked questions, and additionally some frequently asked questions related to IRS reporting. And then the next section is higher education emergency relief funds, the institutional portion. And similarly, you see frequently asked questions posted within that frequently asked question bit. And then we move down into for historically Black colleges and universities, for tribally controlled colleges, and then for minority serving institutions. So each of those are on this page with any of the documentations that have been released for each of those different components.
Priscilla has a question, and she's also helping me vet some questions. So Priscilla, you want to join in? Priscilla is the director for policy here, and Priscilla, give me your title. I'm so sorry, but definitely the director of policy for Alamo Colleges District, and she's helping vet some questions. You have the floor.
Hi, Dr. Sachs. Thank you so much, and appreciate your time today. And so we're tag teaming this effort because we're getting some questions and trying to make sure we're not asking some that are repetitive. But one that's come up, I know in a lot of conversations, and you've talked about it before, is with regards to the difference between online programs and online classes. So one of the institutions says, my institution does not have online programs. However, we have students that were taking online courses on or before March 13th. Are they eligible for CARES Act student aid?
It's a great question. I expect the answer to it to be in our next round of FAQs that get posted.
Okay, great. So, because I know that has come up, because there is a difference between the two and wanted to make sure to clarify that. Another, I think you might have touched on this a little bit, but just making sure. So the May 21 announcement with regards to the effect and applicability of the guidance came out with regards to Title IV eligibility requirements. You mentioned earlier that FAQs were in the queue. Will that address some of the additional guidance that was kind of hinted at the end of that statement that might be coming with regards to eligibility? Is that also in the queue and part of those FAQs?
So the very top of the page that I just ran through with you has 3 paragraphs written in red. And so that is the most current information about Title IV eligibility and kind of where the department is on it. I know ACCT, the Community College Trustee Association, did a really nice analysis of it. If you're looking for sort of what we have on our website is lawyer speak. ACCT put something out for community colleges in particular that's a little more human speak. So that would be one I would point you to if you're looking for sort of the analysis of it. But you're exactly in the right spot for as soon as we post anything else, this is the website that it's on.
And one other question that has come up, and I know that there was guidance and flexibility with regards to federal work study and use of dollars. And so the question is, can institutional dollars be used for the non-federal portion of federal work study for students in the summer or potentially in the fall if we are still unable? And
that's a great question. No one has asked me that one yet. I'll put it in our queue for the post-secondary group so that it can get in an FAQ. That's a great question.
I have one, Casey.
Yeah.
For the 30-day initial report, is the date the institution received the funds the date they appeared in G5 or when the school actually draws down their funds?
Your GAN, that's your grant award notification, says what your date is for the beginning of your 30 days. I don't remember, I haven't looked at anyone's, so I don't remember if your start date is when you draw them or when you receive them. I think it's when you receive them, but please look at your GAN because every college's date is a little different because everyone got in the queue at a different time.
Okay, and then we'll have a clear response also when all of these questions are put in an FAQ as well. So I know that it's hard when you're on the spot like that. Let's see. I want to make sure that I haven't missed anybody's question coming through. There were 2 that I think you may have responded to, but I just want to make sure.
Casey,
Yeah.
One that you responded to, but maybe deserves some verbal clarification because your response was quite long actually. So was on the drawing down of the institutional dollars and whether or not you've used or spent or sent out the student dollars. It was one with regards to, can you please clarify, are institutions able to draw down the institutional dollars before any of the student funds are dispersed? And is the amount that can be drawn down limited in any way contingent upon the amount of student dollars dispersed?
Yeah, that was the first one Rose asked me.
Okay, I just want to make sure that yes, perfect.
I just wanted to thank Assistant Secretary Stumps and Deputy Assistant Secretary Sachs for their, there we go, start my video, for their responses and all their work for CARES. I think all of us, and I know our team, have been very diligent in ensuring we can provide emergency aid to students directly. And then we're looking forward to receiving more guidance and clarification from Department of Ed on the HBCU funds as well as HSI funds. So just and the estimated time on that, Deputy Assistant Secretary, would be, when do you think that would be?
Your crystal ball works about as well as mine does.
Okay. Well,
as soon as we go through that process and get everybody to say yes, they'll get posted.
Okay, great. And then just in looking forward to next fiscal year, do you think there will be additional latitude that would be given to IHEs with regard to federal work study or other things to assist students in need?
So anything that we can do that we've gotten from colleges, any flexibility we have, the way Congress has written our current guiding statutes, we've said yes to almost every single thing that we've been able to. The places where there still isn't flexibility, it's because we need a statutory change. So we have a work study experimental site running right now, and it's been very popular. We need Congress to reauthorize the Higher Education Act and make some changes to the work study provisions to be able to give everybody that flexibility. So we've got kind of a give and take between what we can do and what we want to do, but we need a little bit more help from Congress to be able to pull it off.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Chancellor Flores, this is Scott Stump, and I just wanted to say thank you for laying out the example of the 18,000 learners that you were able to quickly mobilize to get them across the finish line in the spring and then set them up for success as they return to the institution in the fall. And Rose, I would just say, Director Martinez, that the one word you didn't include in your list that you described community colleges with earlier on was nimble. And, having spent the past, almost 20 years of my life in this space of, really thinking through what community colleges can do, they are the ones that can mobilize to serve students the best. And that's where we just wanted to, before we dropped off, also share two additional items. One, on our OCTE, so the Office of Career Technical and Adult Education's website, under links, lincs.ed.gov, there's a variety of resources for adult ed programs that we know many of your institutions take care of in your communities and help those vulnerable learners. Well, they've been very face-to-face focused more than just about any other aspect of our education system. But we've been pulling together resources and examples of how you can do that. Number one, the getting a student in and making them eligible, not necessarily just by an assessment that usually has to be face-to-face, but other means so that we can continue to serve our adult and literacy engaged students that we need to move forward. The second piece is there's a piece that we would love your input on, and Casey's been helping with an executive order, a national initiative that is the American Worker Public Advisory Board that has released a call to action of really engaging in the community college space of how do we take those 30, 35 million individuals that are currently on the sidelines and over the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 months, quickly re-engage them into the emerging economy that comes after the post-COVID impact. And so, Casey, you might share with them what are the 3 edicts of that group and where they can put that input in.
Yeah, thank you. I actually, Rose, will you even put a question mark in the chat so that I can respond to it with the website that I'm about to tell you? The advisory board just recently ratified a call to action really organized around 3 immediate themes. It's very much about enduring workforce recovery goals. So the first is expediting workers' return to employment and upward mobility. We really want to invest in career pathways and implement skills-based hiring practices, and they're looking for ways to do that. The second is removing obstacles to the modernization of the American workforce, and really looking at education and training and accelerating, reskilling, and facilitating innovation in the workforce development space. And the third is building that technological infrastructure that's so necessary for the future of work. And so there's a PDF document, it's not too long, maybe 4 or 5 pages, that really spell out these 3 priorities, and it will be the framework for us moving forward in terms of workforce recovery goals. And the Department of Commerce has a link on their website, and I'm going to post it right now in the question and answer section, because we really are looking for public comments, and Commerce's site links out to the Federal Register, and that would be the place where I would ask, please go there and comment. So read it and figure out how you think this will affect you and your students and your community so that we can have everybody's best thinking on the issue.
you. Yeah, I will stick that in our Q&A. I don't think I can do it as a co-host, but I will make sure that we plug that in. So I appreciate that. I think that another question that would be important is talking about reporting, and what are your hopes to do with that report? Where is it going to go? What is it that you want to learn that's occurring with these funds that might help community colleges in the future, maybe for future funding or just working more closely with the U.S. Department of Education?
Yeah, the funding reporting requirements are out and pretty simple. It's the 30-day requirements, and you're just asked to post information on your website. Anything else that comes out after this will be in future FAQ documents. So it's a moving target.
Thank you. Let me see if there's anything else. I have one. Hi, I'm a former program director of the Futures Assembly. Hi, Uttam, good to have you online. I work at an HBCU in their community college leadership program. Thank you so much to the panelists for sharing these insights. I'm interested in learning more on how HBCUs can benefit from this. Kudos to the Alamo leadership team for the impressive results. Thank you so much. So how can HBCUs benefit with the funding that's being provided?
I mean, I think that's very much up to your college and how you're making decisions. So as Chancellor Flores pointed out, there are some strategies that they're using in the Alamo community, and those are amazing, and leveraging, you know, the $9 million from another fund that Alamo also has to be able to really support students. And so they're thinking of all of the CARES Act dollars very holistically, at least that's what I heard. Other colleges are taking a really different approach and saying, we're going to use the HBCU dollars for the same kinds of programming that we were focused on for our original Title III, 5, or 7 program, and kind of doubling down on an initiative that they already have happening at the college. So it really depends on your community and where your priorities are. And the act is written in a really flexible way that especially those HBCU dollars can be used in the way that you see at your colleges to the best use for your students.
Thank you. Well, we're going to have to end it there. So I want to say thank you so much to Assistant Secretary Stump and Deputy Assistant Secretary Sachs. We look forward to the FAQs in full, and that way we can provide them to our folks. And I know that there are a lot of technical questions that unfortunately each one of you can't provide on your own, so we understand that. But thank you so much. Thank you for Dr. Flores and all the great work that you shared that's happening at Alamo Colleges District. I mean, those students are a very good example of who's benefiting, and it's wonderful to see the work in action. You know, in closing, we know that community colleges educate 11.8 million students and produce over 852,000 associate degree recipients, roughly 580,000 certificate holders, and now over 19,000 BA recipients from our colleges. We will continue to be here for our students and appreciate the CARES Act funding that's been provided. We know that we're a vital component to bringing the nation back to a stronger form of itself. And so I just want to thank everyone on the call. I want to remind everyone, if we can go to that last slide, that we do have the Bellwether Award competition. And this is probably a great time to start looking at some of the innovations that are happening, because I know things are changing, and this is a wonderful opportunity to share what's around the nation, what's happening at our colleges that are on this call and others, and really celebrate the fact that we're doing good work. And so with that, I want to thank everyone on the call, and you can reach out to me, look for Bellwether also for information on the Bellwether Award competition, and just wish everyone good health and continued prosperity. Thank you so much. This ends our webinar.